Hello, my name's Jorb. I love gear. This is a new series. I'm going to call it Redirect Your Gas.
Do not buy that.
And I'm going to recommend used gear based on new releases. I'm going to run through 5 synths that are popular right now on Sweetwater and make recommendations for cheaper options that are vintage or older or just less talked about in the current synth market or chatter, whatever you want to call it. It'd be really, really difficult for me to think of one synth, one product that can do something that nothing else can come close to. In 99% of cases, you can do the same job with something else. And in a lot of those instances, you can get that other thing for cheaper because it's not the one people are talking about right now. And it might be old. I'll probably recommend it used because I buy everything used. I think that's very important. But I want to share that approach. I want to share that perspective. I want to share that idea that whenever I'm interested in something, I think, can I get something else that could do the same thing for less money? And that's essentially what the series is going to be. If you are subscribed, bless you. I think we're right around 850. It feels amazing. Really does. If this was recommended to you or you found me through a search, welcome. I love gear. I talk about it all the time. This series in particular has value to you. Please like the video. It goes a long way in helping me out. And if you want to see the next one I do, you got to subscribe and it'll come out eventually with your feedback included, which you should be putting in the comments. Okay. Alrighty. No more chatting, no more delay. The first things up is the Behringer 2600. The Blue Marvin and the Gray Meanie are the two new ones. I think the only difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, between the first run they did and these new ones is a real spring reverb. They call it true spring reverb. They're very cool, they're very exciting, but I don't like the format of rack mount that much, and I think it's just unwieldy to try and think of a scenario where that's going to be anywhere other than in your studio. But if you're open to that, not a problem. If you like the idea of things being semi-modular, there are cheaper ways to get into it. The Behringer Neutron, which has gone up in price recently. I remember them being around $250, maybe a little lower. Presumably they'll drop soon again. It's better as a semi-modular start because it'll actually fit in a Euro rack, as opposed to thinking some way to have a Euro rack that's close enough to 19-inch rack. It becomes a little unwieldy, especially if you aren't so sure that Euro rack is the way you want to go. It can be very expensive to get enough space and size. So this is just the cheapest Neutron I saw between Reverb and eBay, and I'll plug it. And if you're lucky enough, you see this video soon enough after it releases, you can go right there and buy it now. I do think that's a pretty good deal. I had one for a while. I didn't hate it. I had problems with tuning on mine, tuning scale, which in hindsight might have been the way I was routing MIDI to CV. Anyway, as well, if it's just the ARP sound, the idea of having the ARP sound, and you don't have good space for a 19-inch rack, and you don't have any MIDI keyboards or enough space or enough outputs in your interface to incorporate the Behringer 2600. Behringer also copied the Odyssey. You'll get a somewhat similar sound. It's also copying ARP, but it has its own sequencer. It has its own keyboard. There's built-in effects on this one. If you aren't interested in Behringer, Korg has done a few reissues of the Odyssey. I've got one right up there, which is just like this, a Rev 1. This listing in particular, they actually listed it as a Rev 3 when it's a Rev 1. You get a bit of a deal because they do fetch a bit of a premium for that white faceplate. And they do ones with and without keyboards. With keyboards, it's a little more expensive to the point where it's more expensive than these new Behringer ones. But used, you can do pretty good and get close, especially if you aren't interested in anything semi-modular. This is a pretty good option. There are some patch points on the back, but it's not really fully compatible. Okay, next up, the sequential Prophet 5 reissues, the Rev 4 as they're calling it. Super, super, super interesting. Super, super, super expensive. I'm sure you know it's true to vintage. It's effectively the Prophet 5 that they released so many years ago, but updated with some modern components and a few modern features. Super cool. Exactly the sort of thing everybody was asking during this analog renaissance. They're amazing, but they're way too expensive for most people. So if it is the Prophet sound that you're after, you can save a little bit of money and still get an effectively new Prophet 6, which has some more modern features, built-in effects, a sixth voice, which I don't know why you would complain about it, and a lot of the same sound is there. A lot of the Dave Smith feel is there. The architectures aren't that dissimilar, but you get a lot more modern features. I don't know why most people would have a problem with that. I'm pretty sure it's just mono out on the Prophet 5 as well, and you have voice spread and some other things that allow you to be in stereo with the Prophet 6. Okay? If you want to go cheaper, or you're more interested in vintage, Dave Smith work. Prophet 600s are pretty readily available, especially modded with the Gleegly mod, and people will say that these have the later Curtis chips and they don't sound the same. Do your research and listen to sound demos and decide if it makes sense for you, because you can get vintage Prophets, vintage sequential for not that much money. If the 600 doesn't interest you that much, you could get a Rev 2 or a Prophet 8 for even cheaper. Very nice condition for even less money, and still have a lot of that sound, but modern features as well. Modulation matrix, stereo outs, things like that. If you don't care if it's actually from Dave Smith or sequential, you like the idea of the architecture and the layout. I found the Prologue, I had a Prologue 8 for a little while, and I found the experience in the oscillator setup to be close enough to working with Dave Smith stuff that's what it reminded me of, not just because the name starts with Pro, but part of me wants to believe that that wasn't an accident. I feel like the Prologue 8 and the Prologue 16, which I didn't even pull up, but I'm sure, $1,300, that it wouldn't be that much further away from some of these. You can get the feel and the sound and save a lot of money. And then my final kind of a dark horse, not even close in a lot of ways. And honestly, this is too much money, but it's the cheapest one that I see right now. The Nordly 2, which I've talked about before, I'm very fond of it. Its architecture and its filter are based on the Prophet 5. And it even has, on any Nordly 2, with its factory patches still intact, there's a bunch of Prophet 5 presets already programmed for you. And so they've, from the factory, from the manufacturer, proven that the sound is there. I did a video on that as well. This is as deep as my cross promotion will get, so I'll link that as well. I think they're wonderful. Not at $900. You really should not buy one at $900. Okay. I pretty strictly will not buy new synthesizers. I just do my best to avoid that. Because I know that you can always get a better deal, or if you wait a little bit, they'll show up used. The Korg Op6 has come so close to making me break those rules. I don't have anything that covers that job already. I don't have anything that does FM. And I'm completely in love with this control layout for manipulating operators. That makes it easy for me to experiment and learn a style of synthesis I don't know. Certainly not in the way that I know subtractive synthesis. So appealing, but $800 is a lot to swallow, especially for something I haven't played myself. So you could get the classic. You could get a DX7 for less money. And I think people don't realize, because they just think of vintage and it must be old and inaccessible, but DX7s work with MIDI. There's millions of presets available online. Some of them will have problems, of course, because they're vintage, but I promise you there's resources for every problem you might encounter. Okay? I just want to remind everybody that these are all inspired by things that came before, and even the ones with name recognition can be reasonable prices. Okay? Even better, you could get a lot of the same technology, which, pedantically, the DX21, the DX27, or the DX100, I think, which are all the ones I would consider to be really affordable vintage DX, are 4 operators and not 6 operators, like the Op6, like the DX7. They're just 4 operators. There's plenty of FM sounds that are completely capable with 4 operators. There are certain things you won't be able to do. I would say most stuff I'm interested in, as far as FM sounds, are more than capable with 4 operators. The DX21, I think, has splits and layers. The 27 is similar in architecture, but doesn't have all those features, if you're looking for those as well. The DX100 is the same as the 27, but with mini keys. So do your research on those. Definitely think about it. If it's that control interface of having faders for the operators, let's see if I can zoom in here. They are capacitive, but the Reface DX has that same sort of an idea. Those 4 operators, it's just 4 operators as opposed to the 6 on the Op6, but it is that at any moment you can manipulate your operators. I think that's huge plus. And this is about as cheap as I've seen them new in a really long time. The used ones, I believe, were more money. Yeah, there's only one used, and it's over $500. But this, to me, is a very good deal for what it is. I've been really impressed with these in the past. I haven't owned one, but I am a fan of the Reface series. And then, as cheap as we can get, the Volca FM is only 3 voices, but it is 6 operators, and it takes original DX7 patch memory, patch information. So cool, and is a great way to say, I'm interested in FM, but I don't want to throw the money at it. You can get a lot of the sounds, and try a lot of the sounds, and sample for totally nominal price relative to other keyboards. I'm sure you know about that, but it's just fun to bring up. Okay, next. Alrighty. Next up, Arturia Micro Freak. It's everywhere, digital oscillators, analog filter, 4-voice paraphonic. I have one. I love it. You should just buy one. If you're interested in a Micro Freak, you should just get one. But you should get one used. $270 plus 20 shipping is really close. And at this point, you might as well get new in case you want to return it or whatever else. You have a problem with it, warranty, etc., etc. But I'm sure if you're patient, one will come up cheaper than that. I'm pretty sure this is the cheapest one that's available because anything that's cheaper goes very, very fast. So put alerts on Reverb if you're interested in one cheaper, or check your local listings. I bought mine locally, and I don't feel like I'm in a synth-heavy area, even if there's a way to quantify that. Okay, I just wanted to plug this one as well because I think it's very cool. If you're interested in doing the module mods that we've seen floating around the internet, somebody's already done it and they're selling it already. And I'm sure they'd include the keyboard as well. Just a plug for this stranger because I think it's cool work. Alrighty. And lastly, I picked these based on things I had good opinions on. The 5 I had good opinions on, and that seemed to cover a diverse range. So I was hoping that I might be able to cover everything that somebody was interested in around this time. So last but not least is the Subsequent 37. There's also a Sub 37 Tribute Edition, a Sub 37 CV. The CV commands insane prices used because I don't think there were very many. The Tribute Edition seems to be the lowest. But this new Subsequent 37, which you tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think the changes really warrant. I don't think the differences between it and the earlier models warrant that much of a price increase, especially not a premium if you're buying them used. It's refactored multi-drive and higher headroom. I don't feel like my Sub 37, which actually is in camera, I don't feel like I was lacking headroom, and I don't feel like the multi-drive could have even been better. So I bring this up only because it's in the popular one, and the idea that you want a 2-oscillator monosynth, it's modern, it has presets. Those are my criteria for this, right? And so if it has to be Moog, if you're set on that, first, the Little Fatty is about as close as you can get without still being a Sub 37. I believe they have, I'm pretty sure they're based on the same architecture. You lose most of your hands-on control. You're down to one knob per section, essentially. And with the buttons below, you direct it to a new parameter. That slows my workflow down enough that I'm not interested in them. If you're the type to make your presets in advance and then sit down and play live, this can be a wonderful option. If you don't find yourself tweaking things that much, or especially not between parameters, you can save a good chunk of money and get a lot of the same sounds. Again, if it has to be Moog and you don't need a keyboard, you're in a studio situation, you have a good MIDI routing setup, save a little bit more money, save a little bit of money and get one that's rack mount, or a desktop version, even cheaper. If you don't care as much about having presets, I'm pretty sure you can if you're using a desktop editor, and if you're working in a DAW, that can be a non-factor. Fewer knobs still, but still 2 oscillators. On the Minitar, if part of the excitement for you is that Moog is an American company and you're buying American-made, whatever, Dave Smith has made the Mofo Keyboard, which is a 2-oscillator monosynth that has presets. It is fewer keys, and it is fewer knobs. For example, there's 3 envelopes, but 5 knobs shared between them, and so you press a button to change between I'm manipulating the amp envelope, I'm manipulating the filter, and I'm manipulating the mod envelope, which can be a little, you slow you down a little bit. It's definitely a downgrade to all the knobs you get on the Sub 37, but a lot of it's there, and you can get them cheaper than this. They don't come up super often. Even Reverb's estimate says between 4 and 6, and this is up at 7. So I'd say wait if you actually want one and don't buy this listing. I have one. I'm trying to come to terms with it. I didn't love it the way I wanted to, but I'll talk about that later. If you don't care about keys and all those things are still important to you, cheaper, here we are. They do just a desktop version. This, in my eyes, doesn't fill the same role because you don't have the knobs. To me, this is so different from the Mofo Keyboard. I don't use software essentially at all, and so using the software editor isn't really an option for me, and I don't know that I could get over having so few knobs for hands-on control because I'm always tweaking things, I'm always manipulating. But it's certainly an option, the Mofo desktop. And then, of course, the Bass Station 2. We've heard the conversation forever that the Bass Station 2 is punching well above its price. I think that's true. I'm borrowing one from a friend right now with the expectations of doing a big do you get what you pay for monosynth shootout, and I'm completely head over heels with it. I think the programming is faster and easier than the Mofo. Even though it has a similar setup for its knobs, I find it faster and easier to program than the Mofo Keyboard, and it sounds great. And anybody who tells you that It sounds worse than a Moog because it's not a Moog is wrong. They sound very good. I think that's all of them. Alrighty. That's all of them. I'm just going to do 5 every time. I don't know if this is a great idea. I know it's a topic I want to talk about, and I want to make sure I find the right way to do that. And this was the first idea I thought of. You let me know if it works for you, if there's a better way to do it. I like the idea in general of browsing for things and talking about price up front. I think that's the most important part of anybody buying equipment, of anybody buying synthesizers, really anything. Maybe every month, maybe every 2 months. But I know I'm going to keep talking about it for sure. And I really want feedback on format. I really want feedback on approach. If you think there's a better way to pick which ones I talk about, not going through Popular and Sweetwater. If I could do polls, I would definitely do polls. I don't think you can do that until you have 1,000 subs. So we're close. 850. Bless you guys. Subscribe if you want me to do polls. I can't believe it. Okay. If you think there's a better way to present this information as well, I'm totally open to doing a deep dive on an individual piece of gear. I think it's less valuable if I don't have it in front of me and I don't have any hands-on experience with it. But I do think there's still a lot to talk about. For example, the Behringer 2600, if maybe just a 5-10 minute episode on what I see as plausible alternatives to that, with maybe half or a quarter of the video devoted to what I see in it, what jobs I see it filling, the sort of person I see buying it. I think all those things are valuable to know, especially if you're someone who isn't nearly as obsessive about gear and these things as I am. I'd love to share that knowledge. I think that it's important to remember that not everybody knows the same things. Not everybody has the same experience with this industry or this hobby. That's really it. I hope this had value to you. Comment if it did. Comment if it didn't. Like if you liked it. Dislike it if you think I'm an asshole. My name's been Jorb. I love gear. Know your markets. Do your research. Due diligence. It's always been about gear. Life's always been about gear. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.